Hi, today we're going to talk about how to declutter with the 90-90 rule. First, I'm going to define what that rule is. Then I'm going to talk about some considerations and pitfalls when applying it. And lastly, I'm going to cover what to do if you have decluttering regret. So if you got rid of something that you later wish you hadn't. So the 90-90 rule is very straightforward, very clear cut. It's asking two questions about the item and then getting rid of it. Have you used the item in the last 90 days? And will you use it in the next 90 days? So you can see this is focusing on a very functional use of the item, right? Have you used it? Will you use it? And the length of time is 90 days. It's a nice time frame because it's 6 months. And so one of the places that, quickly people think about is seasonal items. However, I know here in Ohio, at least, 6 months, it's like, that's about the edge of it's cold weather and then, it's getting warmer. And then 6 months later, it's getting cold again. So I think they're kind of saying, if you haven't used it or are going to use it, it's like a 6 month. If you're thinking of yourself right in the middle of 6 months, then you probably don't need it. So I would argue that this is a pretty harsh line. I wrote down, what's your decluttering personality? I think this rule is not for everyone. I have never been interested in decluttering my personal home with a rule that is quite so hard and fast and quite so, if you haven't used it, get rid of it. Because I think there are things that I want and need that I don't necessarily use every single 90 days. That being said, that's what the rule is, and some people want to use it to declutter their home. Here are the pitfalls, right? It's like seasonal items, especially if you have kind of once a year items. Because if you're in the middle of summer and you're asking, have you used the item in the last 90 days? Will you use it in the next 90 days? The answer is probably no, But if you use it every year, you have 20 people to your house for a winter holiday and you hand out Christmas mugs and they're full of hot chocolate, or you get out your menorah and you light your candles, or you pull out your sleds and go sledding, or your skis and you go skiing. Those are all cases where if it's the middle of July or the end of July, that it's not going to work. So you really want to consider seasonal items. I would not apply this rule to those. The other broad category would be sentimental items. I mean, those items, you're not keeping them for use. You're more keeping them for a feeling. And so if you're not keeping it for use, these rules, these questions aren't really going to help. Have you used the item in the last 90 days? Will you use it in the next 90 days? So sentimental items, don't apply the rule. And then I mentioned once a year items with that seasonality. I do think that, I don't know. I think me as a person, sometimes I waffle, sometimes I go back to things. I'm thinking of a hobby. I did a needlepoint. It probably took me close to 2 years to finish it. That's the season of life I'm in. I might have put it down for 6 months, but I was coming back to it, So I think you have to really consider if this is the right rule for you. I remember I read Marie Kondo's books a long time ago, but I remember, and I think it was maybe her second book, telling a story of, her question is, does it spark joy? And I think she had a screwdriver, and she, said, this does not spark joy. And she got rid of it. And Later, she needed it, right? She needed the screwdriver and she was like, oh, I got rid of it. And she tells the story of like, sort of trying and failing to use a paper clip or, whatever. You try other stuff. And she's like, a screwdriver is very functional and it doesn't maybe spark joy and you probably still need to keep it. And I think that's where I get a little bit afraid of this rule. I think that there are things that you probably want and need and use. And I don't know if the 90-day rule, it's a short time frame. I think it depends a lot on your lifestyle. Who are you decluttering for? Are you just decluttering for yourself? Are you decluttering, with a family in mind, more people than just you? So yeah. Another consideration for people who are trying to apply it is kind of how to track the 90 days. So this is a little tricky, right? Because 90 days is a long-ish time period. The easy one that many people have heard of is in the closet, you kind of reverse all the hangers and then, you just hang it the opposite way so the hook is facing out instead of in. And then you can, do that on a certain date, maybe even write it down, stick that Post-it on your closet wall, and then you can come back 90 days or 180 days, 2 90-day periods later and see which ones are flipped, which things you've used, basically. For other things, I love efficiency, and I just don't know how practical it is to track if you've used something in the last 90 days. I think it's more the idea of like, okay, let me look at today's date. Let me sort of count back 3 months ago. Have I used it in this time frame? Do I remember using it? And sometimes, honestly, I'll go into a bathroom and there'll be some toiletries sitting on the counter and they're covered with a thick layer of dust. I don't really need to apply a rule for me to say how often do you use those? I'm anticipating the person's going to say not very often because I can see it, right? So just recognizing that, being honest with yourself, or, I haven't been in the back of, that room. This happens. I haven't been in the back of that room for 3 years. Or, oh, we found that and that belongs to my ex-husband, which means it's at least 5 years old. That's where you can kind of say, we don't need it. We don't need it. I moved here 8 years ago and never unpacked that box. Maybe it has some sentimental items that you want from your childhood or something like that, but chances are you can probably get rid of that, right? Maybe you want to look through it, but chances are you do not need it. So I think that's the broader information that the 90-90 rule is encouraging you to consider, look at, and then declutter accordingly. One reason that people keep stuff, and I've mentioned this before, is they're worried, what if I need it, right? What if I need it in the future? So maybe it's that second question of will I use it in the next 90 days? Maybe. This is where the 2020 rule can come into play. The 2020 rule is basically if anything is under $20, so it's inexpensive to replace and you can get it within about 20-ish minutes of your home, then you probably can get rid of it with confidence that if you needed it, you would be able to afford and, physically go and get it again. Obviously, that doesn't apply if it's expensive and specialty and, blah, blah, blah. But a lot of things we're keeping just in case, and a lot of the small stuff that kind of clutters up our space is really, you can get rid of it with confidence, knowing you can get more if you would need it. What to do next? Once you decide to get rid of something, really just, is it trash? Is it broken? Is it stained? Is it torn? Throw it away. And then if it's not, if it's in, good shape and usable, someone else might want it, clean, donate it. And, looking for charities in your area, churches, every area is so different and unique with places that they have. And people, have a lot of feelings about where they want to give their stuff. So usually professional organizers in your area do know where things can be donated, or just ask around. Sometimes people are having a community-wide garage sale. I just was at the house of a client and we put some clothing she didn't want into a bag. Her friend was going to have a yard sale, and so she could put those items in with her friend. She didn't have to have a sale herself. She just could give her friend some things and be done, which is fantastic. So now that you've hopefully gotten out of it, the last thing I wanted to, gotten rid of the item that you didn't want, the last thing I wanted to talk about is, what if you have regrets, right? That's what's holding us all back from decluttering more, is like, what if I regret that? So there's a couple answers to this question. One thing is, if you're really unsure about getting rid of something, you can build in a time buffer for yourself. And I do that. I did it when I started decluttering my own home, and I tend to do it now just naturally because things collect in a box, and then when it gets full, I take it to a charity place. But until it's full, it's kind of sitting there. And so if I want to take something out, I do. Or sometimes even when it's full, then I kind of load everything into a bag, take it to the place. I might put a couple things back and let them sit in the charity box for another round to be like, maybe we need this. I think there's an alarm clock sitting in there now that's been in there for a while, because I just feel like the moment I get rid of it, I'll want it back. And that's okay, right? It's not a reason not to declutter or not to clear out other things. And Minimal Mom, she's on YouTube. You can watch her videos. She says, have a time will tell box. So you can literally put a box of maybes together, put the date on it, and put it in your long-term storage. Part of the point is that it's not in your everyday living space. And then if you need something from it, you can pull it back. And maybe you wait a month before you make that donation. The key is, when you're ready to make the donation, don't open the box. Just donate it. I recommend that with small children too. You can box things up and move it to the garage, to the basement, out of the way, out of sight, and wait. See if they ask for something by name, and if so, when they're out of the house, when they're totally asleep or at school or at daycare, you can pull the item out and be like, oh, last night I looked for your stuffed animal and I found it, and bring it back out. There's probably still 75 other items that they did not even think about. And so don't let that potential for regret stop you from decluttering. And that's part of the reason you should start with easy things. Start with things that are highly replaceable. If I got rid of this shirt and then regretted it, very likely there's another flowered shirt that I can get. Or even if it's a name brand item, I can go on ThreadUp or, the secondhand places and possibly even get the same item again. And that's happened to me. There was a lovely vase that I decluttered, and then later I felt like, I really liked that vase. And it was not a sentimental vase. It didn't have any special meaning. But you know what? I went on eBay and ordered the same vase. It was not a big deal. So you just want to, and the more you do, the more you're going to be confident and stronger in your decisions and your ability to get rid of things and get rid of the next thing. So you want to, don't let that potential for regret stop you in your tracks. Find the things that are easy that you feel confident in and declutter those. Just to talk a little bit more about decluttering regret, what if I get rid of something and then I need it, right? Because sometimes our brain does that, right? I hadn't looked at this thing for 5 years, but I looked at it and then I got rid of it. And then 3 days later, my brain was like, oh, you could have used that, right? So there are other options, right? You think of like more of the olden times. Could you borrow it? Could you ask a neighbor or a friend? It kind of makes an interesting life. Could you be creative? If you've gotten rid of something and you don't really need it, but maybe you're like, oh, it'd be nice to do this. I know if my friends ask me to borrow something, I'm like, sure, no problem. Happy to give it. I'm thinking, I used to do a job working with children. I had some reference books with activities. My neighbor across the street got a job working with children. I said, oh, you know what? Here are my favorite workbooks. And I think inside the cover it says property of Devon, and maybe I'll get them back. But I'm not working with kids in that way, and I haven't for a couple of years. And I don't know if I ever will again. So I'm happy for her to use them versus saying, go out and buy your own books. And I think most people are like that. And other things, right? It's a short-term borrow. So kind of like be creative. Can you use something else? Can you ask a friend or family member? The last thing I want to leave you with is this concept of the twitch. And this is by Anthony Ungaro. And I think he has a TED Talk and, plenty of information online. But basically, we like to reinvent ourselves or think of a new thing, right? Like my example is, I'm going to be a runner, and I'm a little bit of a runner, but I'm not running marathons, and the idea is I'm going to start running, right? And we get excited and we're like, yes, this is going to be great. I'm going to feel so good. I'm going to eat healthy and drink a lot of water and run. It's going to be great. And the first thing I do is go online, because it's so easy, and search up a nice pair of running shoes. And then I need some new running socks to go with my shoes, and then I got to be looking cute, so I need a new sports bra, and I order all that. And sometimes even by the time it gets here, I'm going to say 2 days later, maybe it's tomorrow, but I don't open the package, or I open the package and I'm like, these are good. I try it on, and this is good. And then I never actually run. And then I'm like, well, 3 months goes by and it's in the corner of my room. 6 months goes by and they're really collecting dust. 9 months goes by and I'm like, I've doubled down on my crocheting hobby. So it's just the twitch is we think the first thing we have to do is buy something, consumerism culture, right? That's the twitch. The twitch is the reach. The thing we do is buy something. But how can you start that reinvention without a purchase? I mean, this is good for your wallet too, people, right? But how could you, if I want to be a runner, same story. It's okay, let me put on my shoes and see if I go for a walk. Let me do the run first. And then in a few weeks, if I'm actually running, I can order new shoes then. How can you build out a little time delay? Or even if your twitch is still to get on and, it's 2 a.m., I'm not going running now, but I can search up some nice shoes. How can I put that on a wish list and be if I run for 2 weeks, then I'll get them? Just slowing down, delaying a little bit that impulse, that's something to consider. Hopefully that's helpful. And I hope that you now know about the 90-90 decluttering rule, right? So it's I think that the thread of why I wanted to share that is, that this is a little bit harsher rule in terms of you're probably going to be getting rid of a lot more stuff, and maybe you're bringing in more stuff that you don't actually need that you can get rid of with the 90-90 rule. Anyway, prevention. I love a little prevention. Hope that was helpful and would love to hear if you're using the 90-90 rule and how it's going. Bye.